The wind that morning in Arizona was cold enough to freeze the marrow in your bones. It was January 24th, 1955. On the desolate, dusty flats of the Sacaton Reservation, the sun was just beginning to creep over the horizon, casting long, pale shadows across the scrub brush and the hard-packed earth. It was a quiet morning, the kind of morning where the world feels empty, and in a ditch, near an abandoned adobe hut, lay a man. To the few people who walked by that morning, he looked like just another tragedy. He was lying face down in the dirt, his body stiff, his clothes torn and stained with the filth of a rough life. His shoes were worn through to the soles. His hair was matted. The local police, when they finally arrived, didn't rush. They had seen this scene 100 times before. Just another Indian who drank too much, they thought. Just another lost soul who couldn't handle the bottle. They were ready to write it off as exposure, maybe alcohol poisoning, file the paperwork, and go about their day. But when the coroner turned the body over, and when they reached into the pocket of those ragged trousers, they found a wallet. And inside that wallet was a crumpled, faded identification card that bore a name that should have made every single person standing there drop to their knees in shame. The name on the card was Ira Hayes. This wasn't just a man in a ditch. This was a Marine. This was a warrior. This was one of the 6 men, the 6 immortal men who had heaved that heavy steel pipe upright on the volcanic sands of Iwo Jima just 10 years earlier. This was the man whose face was immortalized in the most famous photograph of World War II. This was a man who had shaken hands with President Truman, a man who had been paraded through stadiums, a man who had been called a national treasure. And here he was, dead at 32, frozen to death in his own vomit, alone, abandoned by the very country he had helped to save. When the news hit the papers, it was buried in the back pages, a few column inches. War hero dies of alcoholism. That was it. The world sighed, shook its head, and kept turning. The statue in Washington, D.C. still stood tall, but the flesh and blood man was put in the ground with barely a whisper. But 3,000 miles away, in a hotel room, a man in black was reading the newspaper, and he wasn't sighing. He was shaking. Johnny Cash stared at the headline, and he felt a rage building in his chest that was hotter than any stage light. Johnny knew what it was like to be poor. He knew what it was like to battle addiction. He knew what it was like to have the world look at you and see nothing but a screw-up. But more than that, Johnny Cash had a memory. He remembered the war. He remembered the sacrifice. And he looked at that photo of Ira Hayes, the real Ira, not the statue, and he made a vow. He decided right then and there that he would not let this man be forgotten. He decided that he would take on the radio stations, the record executives, and the entire polite society of America to tell the truth about how a hero was allowed to die in a ditch. This is the story of that battle. This is the story of the song that Johnny Cash used as a weapon, and it is the story of why true patriotism isn't about waving a flag. It is about taking care of the men and women who hold it up. To understand why this hit Johnny so hard, you have to understand who Ira Hayes really was. Before the war, Ira was a quiet, gentle Pima Indian. He loved his land. He was a man of few words, soft-spoken, the kind of guy who would give you the shirt off his back. When Pearl Harbor happened, Ira didn't wait to be drafted. He signed up. He wanted to serve. He wanted to be a United States Marine. He went through the hell of boot camp. He earned his Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. He became a paratrooper. He fought in some of the bloodiest campaigns in the Pacific. And then came Iwo Jima. We have all seen the photo. 6 men struggling together to raise the stars and stripes atop Mount Suribachi. It looks triumphant, but what the photo doesn't show you is the smell of sulfur and rotting flesh. It doesn't show you the bullets whizzing past their heads. It doesn't show you that 3 of those men in the photo would be dead within days of the picture being taken. Ira survived, but in a way, survival was his curse. Because the government saw that photo and saw a gold mine, they pulled Ira off the battlefield. They put him in a clean uniform, and they sent him on a bond tour. They paraded him around the country like a carnival attraction. They wanted him to smile, shake hands, and ask people for money to fund the war. But Ira was dying inside. Every time people cheered for him, he thought about his friends, his good buddies, as he called them, who were rotting in shallow graves on that black sand island. He felt like a fraud. He told his officers, "I was just trying to not get shot. The real heroes are dead." But nobody listened. They just wanted the photo op. And the worst part? The racism. The racism was casual and cruel. People would slap him on the back and say, "Good job, Chief." They wouldn't use his name, just Chief. They'd say, "Hey, Chief, have a drink on me. Hey, Chief, do a war dance." Ira drank to stop the voices in his head. He drank to numb the survivor's guilt. He drank because when he was drunk, he didn't have to be the hero on the poster. He could just be Ira. When the war ended, the cheering stopped. The government got what it wanted, and they cut him loose. Ira went back to the reservation. There was no water for his crops. There were no jobs. The man who had raised the flag couldn't even raise a decent harvest because the water rights had been stolen from his people years ago. He drifted. He got arrested for vagrancy in Chicago and Los Angeles. The newspapers loved it. They would run headlines like, "Hero of Iwo Jima jailed again." They mocked him. And when he finally died that cold morning in 1955, America washed its hands of him. But the story didn't end there, because stories don't die as long as there is a storyteller brave enough to tell them. Fast forward to 1964, New York City, Greenwich Village. The folk music scene was exploding. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and revolution. Johnny Cash was there. He was at the top of his game. He had hits, he had money, but Johnny was restless. He was tired of the polished, rhinestone cowboy image that Nashville wanted him to project. Johnny felt a darkness in him, a kinship with the downtrodden. He was searching for something real. One night at a party, he met a man named Peter Lafarge. Peter was a folk singer, a rodeo rider, and the son of a Pulitzer Prize winner. But more importantly, Peter had lived among the Pima people. He knew the story of Ira Hayes not from the newspapers, but from the people who loved him. Peter sat down with an acoustic guitar and looked Johnny in the eye. He said, "I wrote a song, Johnny. It's about Ira." The room went quiet. Peter started to play. It wasn't a fast song. It was a march, a slow funeral march. "Call him drunken Ira Hayes. He won't answer anymore." As Peter sang the lyrics describing the water rights, the war, the drinking, and the ditch, Johnny Cash felt tears running down his face. He felt a physical pain in his chest. It wasn't just a song. It was an indictment. It was the truth that America had been hiding from. Johnny slammed his hand on the table. He said, "Peter, I'm going to record that, and I'm going to make sure every person in this country hears it." Johnny Cash wore black not for fashion, but for the poor, the beaten down, and the forgotten. If this story touched your soul, please leave a like to honor his memory. To keep the legend alive and hear more untold stories from the darkness, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for helping us keep the Man in Black's voice heard. Now, you have to understand the climate of 1964. The civil rights movement was happening, yes, but the plight of the Native American was still largely ignored. It wasn't popular. It wasn't sexy. And for a country music star whose audience was mostly conservative, white, patriotic Americans, to sing a song that accused the United States of mistreating a war hero, that was suicide. That was career suicide. When Johnny took the song to Columbia Records, the executives looked at him like he had lost his mind. Picture the scene. A boardroom in a skyscraper in Nashville. Men in expensive suits, smoking cigars, looking at sales charts. And there sits Johnny, in his black boots, looking like a storm cloud. One executive cleared his throat and said, "Johnny, listen, we love you. You're selling records. But this is depressing. It's too long. And frankly, people don't want to hear about Indians losing their water. They want to hear about love, or trains, or prison. Give us another Ring of Fire. Don't give us a history lesson." Another one chimed in. "Think about your sponsors, Johnny. Think about the radio stations. They won't touch this. It's too political. You're going to alienate your fan base." Johnny stood up. He leaned over the table. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He just said, "I don't give a damn about the charts. I don't give a damn about the sponsors. This man fought for this country. He died for this country. And his country let him rot. If I have the platform, then I have the responsibility to say his name. You record it or I walk. They recorded it, but the executives were right about one thing. The radio stations hated it. The song, The Ballad of Ira Hayes, was released on the album Bitter Tears. It was a masterpiece. It was raw, it was angry, and it was beautiful. But when it was sent out to the radio DJs across the South and the Midwest, it hit a brick wall. The silence was deafening. Stations simply refused to play it. They said it was spoken word, not music. They said it was too long. But the truth was, they were cowards. They were afraid of the message. They were afraid of looking in the mirror. Weeks went by. The album was tanking. The song was dying on the vine. It looked like Ira Hayes was going to be silenced again, this time by the music industry. Johnny Cash was on tour when he saw the charts. He saw that his song wasn't even cracking the bottom. He sat in his tour bus, pacing back and forth like a caged tiger. Most artists would have given up. They would have said, well, I tried, and moved on to the next commercial hit. But you don't tell the man in black what he can't do. And you certainly don't tell him to shut up when he's defending a brother. Johnny reached into his pocket. He pulled out his own checkbook. He didn't ask the record label for money. He didn't ask his manager. He wrote a check for $15,000. Now, in 1964, that was a fortune. That was the price of a nice house. He used that money to buy a full-page ad in Billboard magazine, the Bible of the music industry. The ad didn't have a picture of the album cover. It didn't have a catchy slogan. It had a picture of Johnny, looking fierce, and a letter written directly to the DJs and the program directors who were censoring him. He wrote, DJs, station managers, owners, where are your guts? He called them out. He asked them why they were afraid of the truth. He compared them to the people who had abandoned Ira in the first place. He wrote, Ira Hayes is strong medicine. So was Rochester, Harlem, Birmingham, and Vietnam. He told them, I've sold millions of records for you. I've made you money. Now I'm asking you to play this song not for me, but for the man who raised the flag so you could have the freedom to play any record you want. It was a declaration of war. He was biting the hand that fed him. He was telling the entire industry to go to hell if they couldn't handle the truth. The morning that magazine hit the desks in Nashville, New York, and Los Angeles, the phone lines lit up. People were shocked. Who does he think he is? They asked. But then something happened. A few brave DJs started to play it, maybe out of guilt, maybe out of respect for Johnny's audacity. And then Johnny took it to television. He had his own show, The Johnny Cash Show. The producers were nervous. They wanted happy songs. They wanted guests like Bob Hope. Johnny invited Peter Lafarge. Imagine the scene. The cameras are rolling. Millions of Americans are sitting in their living rooms, eating TV dinners. The red light goes on. Johnny steps up to the microphone. He isn't smiling. He looks tired. He looks haunted. The band starts that slow, rhythmic drum beat. Boom, chicka boom. Like a heartbeat, or like the sound of a shovel hitting the earth. Johnny starts to sing, but he doesn't sing it like a pop song. He tells it. Ira Hayes, a Marine blasting them alone. He tells the story of the water. He tells the story of the vines. He tells the story of the jail cells. And when he gets to the end, to the part where Ira dies, Johnny looks straight into the lens of the camera. He stares right into the living rooms of the people who let it happen. His voice cracks, just a little, with a mixture of grief and rage. Yeah, call him drunken Ira Hayes, but his land is just as dry. And his ghost is lying thirsty in the ditch where Ira died. He hits that last note, and he holds it. There was no dancing, there were no flashing lights, just a man in black telling the truth about a man in a ditch. The song reached number 3 on the country charts, but numbers don't matter. What mattered was the impact. Because of Johnny Cash, people remembered. The Pima people, Ira's tribe, heard that song and they wept. For the first time, a white man, a superstar, had stood up and told their story with respect. They welcomed Johnny to the reservation. They treated him like a brother. They gave him a pimamin. They told him, "You have given our son back his dignity." Johnny Cash visited Ira's grave. He stood there in the dry Arizona heat, and he paid his respects, not to a drunk, but to a hero. Johnny taught us something important that year. He taught us that patriotism isn't blind worship. It isn't ignoring the ugly parts of our history. True patriotism is loving your country enough to want it to be better. True patriotism is honoring the veteran not just when they are marching in a parade, but when they are broken, when they are lonely, when they are fighting demons that followed them home from the war. Ira Hayes died alone. That is a tragedy we cannot change. But because of Johnny Cash, he did not die forgotten. Today, if you go to the Iwo Jima Memorial, you will see the bronze statues reaching for the sky. It is magnificent. But if you want to find the real spirit of Ira Hayes, don't look at the bronze. Listen to the vinyl. Put on that record. Hear the deep, trembling voice of the man in black. He is still singing for Ira. He is still singing for the forgotten. He is still reminding us that every hero has a name, and every name deserves to be remembered. Johnny Cash and Ira Hayes are both gone now. I like to think that maybe, just maybe, they are sitting together somewhere up there, maybe sitting by a river that never runs dry. Ira is finally at peace, and Johnny is strumming that guitar, finally satisfied that he did the right thing. We live in a noisy world, friends, a world that moves fast and forgets easily, but we have a duty to remember. We have a duty to be the keeper of our brothers' stories. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that our veterans deserve better, and if you respect the courage of the man in black for standing his ground, I'm asking you to do something simple. Please hit that like button. It's a small gesture, but it helps us keep these stories alive. It helps us reach more people who need to remember what real courage looks like. And if you want to walk the line with us, if you want to hear more untold stories about the legends of music and the moments that defined America, please subscribe to the channel. We have so many more stories to tell, stories of sinners, saints, and the truth in between. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering Ira Hayes. And until next time, keep the music playing and never forget the ones who paid the price.